What is the most paranormal or unexplainable event you've experienced? I've had a couple. The first happened when my ex passed away. At the time, we had a 4-month-old daughter, though we weren't living together. The night he died, I heard footsteps entering the room where my daughter was sleeping. Then I clearly heard his voice speaking to her. I called out, thinking he might have come in through the back door, but there was no response. The next day, I found out he had passed away during the night, likely around the time I heard the voice. The second experience took place in the last townhouse I rented. It wasn't extremely eerie, but still odd. I discovered that my daughter's room had attic access. I was excited because I thought I could use it to store Christmas decorations. I grabbed a kitchen chair to reach it, and though it was physically easy to open, something in my mind wouldn't let me. A strong, irrational fear overwhelmed me, so I left it alone. Occasionally, I felt uneasy in the home, but I assumed it was just because I hadn't lived alone in a while, 2 years at that point. However, I've never had those feelings in my current apartment. Later, my neighbor told me the previous tenant had been a heavy drinker who died by suicide. In the same room, my daughter's room, where the attic access was, I once thought I heard someone say I'm sorry, though the rest of it was unclear. When did all this happen? Do you plan on telling your daughter someday? It happened a little over 4 years ago. I'm not sure when or even if I'll tell her. And thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I know he was my ex, but we had a shared history, and losing him so suddenly was a shock. Not long after, I met my current boyfriend and began spending nights at his house. Usually, I fall asleep quickly, but at his place, I stayed up late, feeling unsettled. I blamed it on the unfamiliar environment. Over time, I adjusted and could fall asleep, but I'd still wake up between 2 and 3 a.m. As my eyes adapted to the darkness, there's very little light pollution in his small town. I thought I could see a little boy sitting on top of the grandfather clock. This happened frequently. I never felt afraid, just puzzled. The boy appeared to be wearing old-fashioned pajamas and would swing his legs over the edge of the clock. I chalked it up to sleep paralysis, dreaming, or an overactive imagination. But when I stayed at my parents' place during school nights, I'd wake up and see the same figure, this time perched on a dresser or ledge in my basement room, where I slept alone. After months of this, I asked to sleep upstairs again, assuming my mind was just playing tricks on me. One evening, while home alone, my family had gone to an appointment. I fell asleep on the living room couch. I dreamt of the little boy knocking over my mom's ornaments on the coffee table. I woke up in a cold sweat and saw the ornaments broken. Of course, they might have already been like that and I just hadn't noticed. It started to get cold in the living room, so I moved to my mum's bedroom to wait for my family and watch TV. In her room, I kept catching glimpses of something out of the corner of my eye, something resembling the little boy. I never saw him fully, but the feeling was there. At this point, I was certain it wasn't sleep paralysis or a dream. I could move freely and was fully awake during most sightings. Eventually, I fell asleep in my mum's bed and woke up to the sound of the boy laughing and running inside the closet. That Friday, I went back to my boyfriend's house. He could tell something was bothering me, but I was too nervous to say anything, worried he'd think I was losing it. That night, I helped his mum with some baking, and I casually mentioned I'd been having strange dreams about a little boy. She immediately asked if he wore pajamas and was young. I was stunned. She knew exactly what I was describing. She said their house was quite old, and over the years they had experienced unusual things, objects moving, voices, laughter. But for the past 6 to 8 months, everything had gone quiet. It's been 3 years since then. I've moved out and now live with my boyfriend while attending college. But I still sense or experience strange things. Objects being moved, unexplained voices. One day, I was hanging out with friends when I suddenly felt lightheaded. My vision turned white until I couldn't see anything. I panicked and thought, Maybe someone had drugged me. I asked my friends to help me outside for some air. As my vision slowly returned, I realized I couldn't speak or respond. I was aware of everything around me but couldn't interact. It felt like I was viewing the situation from outside my own body, like an out-of-body experience. My friend called. My mom, who came to pick me up. I still couldn't speak until I got home and went to the bathroom. 3 days later, my grandfather called my mom, and I immediately. He told her exactly what was going on. My dad had passed away. He was found dead in his bathroom. I live with my mom, and my dad had been living in another state. According to the forensic report, his time of death aligned exactly with the moment. I had that strange episode. I sometimes wonder how to describe it. Is it wholesome or creepy? Maybe it's both. Creepily wholesome seems to fit best. I've always felt a spiritual connection with my father, so I like to think that, in his own way, he was saying goodbye. There's another incident I often think about, even though it happened 7 years ago. I still can't explain it. At the time, I was working from home after being diagnosed with a serious illness. My daily routine was simple: wake up at 7 a.m., take care of household chores, shower, and then by 8 start prepping for work. I usually spent the hour from 8 to 9 making calls and sending emails. That day was no different. I remember checking the time. It was 7:55 a.m. I brewed a cup of coffee using my Keurig machine in the kitchen, located on the main floor of my house. Then I headed upstairs to my office, turned on my computer, and began settling in. That's when I realized I had left my coffee in the kitchen. I walked back downstairs to grab it, and when I picked it up, it was cold. Not just lukewarm, but fully cold. Confused, I thought maybe the machine malfunctioned. Then I looked at the clock. It was 9:14 a.m. I was expecting it to be just after 8 at most, but somehow over an hour had passed. I couldn't explain it. I had never experienced a blackout, seizure, or anything similar before or since. My medication didn't have side effects that could account for lost time, and I was sure I hadn't fallen asleep. I vividly remember typing in my password and saying out loud, "Shit, I forgot the coffee." That unexplained time loss left me deeply unsettled. Turns out I wasn't the only one. I shared my experience online the last time someone brought up something similar, about 5 months ago. It reminded another person of a strange moment they had too, though they didn't believe it was carbon monoxide poisoning. Especially since there were detectors on every floor of their home. This happened to them and their girlfriend about a year ago. Like usual, their alarms went off at 6:30 a.m. and they got up and followed their morning routine. They showered, got dressed, and one of them even texted a co-worker at 7 a.m. to say they'd be there by 7:45. The co-worker replied at 7:30 saying, "Okay." Afterward, the couple sat down to have coffee together. Then, as one of them went to put on their shoes, they glanced at the clock and it was 9 a.m. Panic set in. They were running late. They thought maybe their phone clock was off, but both phones showed the same time. They also noticed missed calls and texts that had come in between 7:30 and 9 hours. Somehow, over an hour and a half had passed while they were just in the kitchen. For what felt like 10 minutes. It was a warm September day, so there was no heater on, and nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. For me, another memorable incident happened after my mother passed away. I used to visit her grave several times, a week usually with my kids. One particular day, as we were driving past the older cemetery plots, my eldest son, who was 6 at the time, asked, "Mom, why are all those people just standing there? What are they waiting for?" The cemetery was completely empty. There wasn't a single person in sight. When we reached my mom's grave, he gently held my hand and said, "Don't worry. Grandma is with Mom, and they're happy." Mom was what we used to call my mother's sister, who had died before I even got married. My son had never heard of her before, nor did he know what we called her. He also began telling us about people who had died in the houses we visited without ever being told those details. Does he still have those sensitivities? Yes, although as he grows older and his attention shifts, he sees less than he used to. Still, he can sense shadows and energies in places and assess whether it feels safe or not. The one thing that truly frightens him is a dark shadow shaped. Like a child, he says it's bad, so we've made it a routine to do weekly spiritual cleansings in the house to keep it away. When I was younger, I said strange things too. I remember once staring at the sky during a bonfire, and my mom asked what I was looking at. I replied, "The ladder from heaven is coming down for the lady down the road." My mom laughed it off, but that night, the woman from down the road passed away. My mom was stunned. I also once had a vivid dream about my great-great-grandmother. I described her to my great-grandmother, who was amazed at how accurate my description was. She even had me look through a photo album, and I picked her out immediately. Another time, shortly after my grandmother passed away, I was walking down the stairs at her house when I saw her standing in the corner. I remember this so clearly, maybe because I hadn't been very close to her. It felt like I was in a trance, and I ended up falling down the stairs. I still wonder about that, especially since she wasn't very fond of my sister or me. I used to live in a town that had its own strange energy, but the house I lived in was something else entirely. Many older relatives who grew up there had their own weird experiences too. There's one experience that still sticks with me. One night I got up to use the bathroom. It was just across the hall from my bedroom. As I stepped into the hallway, I swear, a woman in a full vintage nurse's uniform came sprinting out of the bathroom holding a washcloth and ran straight into my room. I have no idea if someone sick ever lived there long ago, but the house was really old. That was just the mild part, though. The place gave off a feeling, a terrible presence, like someone was watching you. Not just watching, but staring into your soul. Burning eyes. It was an awful sensation. You know that kind of deep-down fear that just sits in your chest? That house had it, and it wasn't just me. My mom's childhood home had the same vibe. I've never felt that in any other house, but that one was just wrong. Everyone who walked into it said the same thing. After my grandma passed, my mom and her siblings inherited it, and my aunt ended up buying it from the rest. Her husband's a contractor, so their plan was to renovate the house and sell it, and they did. Everything from new floors to cabinets to fresh paint, but even after all that, the house still felt the same. Still gave off that dark energy. They tried to sell it for over 5 years and never could. I truly believe no one bought it because of the feeling you get the second you step inside. Reading all of these, I thought I'd share something softer. Grandmother had struggled with dementia for years before she passed. I hadn't spent as much time with her as I wished, and I felt awful about that. The day she died, the guilt hung heavy. But that night I had a dream. I saw her standing in a glowing golden wheat field with a narrow path running through it. She looked at me and gently said, "Everything's okay, sweetheart." I woke up with tears in my eyes, but also with peace. It felt like she was really saying goodbye. Another moment I can't explain. Maybe it was a hallucination, but it scared me. I was sitting in bed watching YouTube for a while. I reached over to set something on my nightstand when I had the strangest feeling, like I hadn't actually moved, like my body was still sitting there. I turned around quickly and I saw myself, still sitting exactly where I was moments ago, with a shocked expression on my face. I freaked out and immediately sat right back down in the same spot. Everything returned to normal, but I'll never forget it. One time, I was in my laundry room when I heard someone whisper right behind me. I screamed, thinking it was my husband playing a prank, but when I turned around, no one was there. It was terrifying. And once, as a teenager, I was sitting at my desk when I saw a pen and paper float into the air and slam back down on the desk. I ran downstairs in hysterics, crying to my mom. She thought I had imagined the whole thing, but I know what I saw. I used to work in a prison. Before my role changed, I had about an hour and a half of downtime before my shift ended. One night, my sergeant asked if I could cover the 11 p.m. inmate count on one of the blocks. He didn't care what I did before or after, just that I showed up for the count. So I went to the area we call Times Square, where one hallway leads to 4 blocks and another leads to the rest. I was sitting at my post when I heard footsteps coming from behind me. But something was off. There were no jingling keys. We all have keys, inmates don't. I turned around. No one was there. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I imagined it. But the guy who was sitting nearby asked, "Who was that?" So I guess I didn't imagine it after all. At 11:00, I headed to the block for the count, but no one was opening the door. I walked back to the Times Square area to call in, let them know not to panic. I just couldn't get in. As I was on the phone, I felt someone lean in close behind me. Right next to my ear, they whispered forcefully, "What are you doing?" Startled, I waved my hand behind me, signaling them to stop messing around. I hung up and turned around, ready to yell, but no one was there. No one in the hallway, no one in sight. I was completely alone. There are so many stories from that place. What you said reminded me of the second part of mine, so I had to share. Did the control room see anything on the cameras? Well, this was before cameras were installed in that part of the building. Even now, aside from our solitary SHU and mental health units, MHU, most cameras don't record 24/7, and they don't have audio, or so we've been told. Still, we once had an officer working in the MHU control room say they saw something on camera. A shadow person. There's a hallway in that section. On one side, there's a door with no windows that you have to be buzzed through, leading into the mental health unit. Across the hall, and just a foot over, is another door with a large window in the top half. That one leads to our disciplinary wing with a few small offices. There's a section in our facility, long hallway, doors to hearing rooms, and it all leads into this big desk area. There's also a locked door that goes into the disciplinary office. Inside the mental health unit, we've got cameras on all 8 inmates. One for the door that leads to the stairs and elevator, one that shows the top of the staircase, and another outside the secure entrance you get buzzed into. One night on the midnight shift, a guy sitting in control glances up at the screens and sees something move in the window of the disciplinary door. That's odd, but not impossible. There's a sergeant's office in there, so he checks with Central to see if anyone logged a visit. Nothing. No one is supposed to be there. He keeps watching. The shadow's still there. Then it shifts, moves away, then comes back, but more to the side, like it's trying to peer. Down the hall without opening the door. This goes on for a few minutes. The other officer sitting with him sees it too. To rule anything out, they call a roundsman to physically check the area. No one was there. Fun fact. Our disciplinary unit used to be the infirmary. A lot of inmates died there, many of them from HIV-related complications. One lieutenant, on his first midnight shift as watch commander, was making rounds alone and said he heard groaning and moaning from that same area. As soon as he stepped in, he felt this deep, primal fear, like something inside was ready to hurt him. He checked the space, found nothing, and bolted out of there. After that, he refused to ever go in there alone again. Even during the day, he made sure someone else was always in the office if he had to be there. When I was in high school, my little brother and I shared a room. Our beds were on opposite sides. He was a heavy sleepwalker and used to talk in his sleep a lot. It was creepy at first, but over time, I got used to it. One night, around 3 a.m., I shot awake from deep sleep, completely alert. Something felt off, like a presence in the room. I turned my head toward my brother's bed and saw this tall, skinny, human-like shadow standing there. It was leaning down, reaching its hand toward my brother's face. Just as the fingers were about to touch him, the figure's head jerked right at me. It stared at me. I froze. Then it started to dissolve, fading upward until it vanished through the ceiling. Immediately, my brother sat straight up, walked calmly to the light switch, turned it on. Then he looked at me and said, "Did you feel it? Did you feel the hand?" He turned the light off and went straight back to bed. I hid under the covers all night. He doesn't remember any of it. Now, I'm usually a skeptic when it comes to ghosts or the paranormal, but when more than one person experiences the same thing, that shakes me. I've dealt with sleep paralysis as a teen. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. It's terrifying. You wake up, but you can't move. You often see shadows or feel an unbearable dread. That could have explained this. If I hadn't been able to move, if I had just seen the shadow, I'd brush it off. But I could move. I did turn my head, and my brother, who was asleep, woke up and said something that should have only been in my head. The night my father passed away, I was alone in our apartment. Everyone else was out mourning at my uncle's. I didn't go. I didn't want to cry in front of everyone. I was in the living room when I heard footsteps in my mom's bedroom. That room had a balcony. Then I heard the balcony door open. I broke down crying, yelling, asking who was there. I went to check. No one. But the room was filled with the smell of tobacco. My dad used to smoke on that balcony. I never told anyone. Kept it to myself. Later, I found out a big family fight broke out after the funeral. Some blame my mom for his death, even though they were childhood sweethearts, and he died of cancer. I like to think my dad came home that night because he didn't want to hear the arguments, just wanted peace. After my mother passed, I had something similar happen. That night, after a long day full of tears, I cried myself to sleep. At one point, I felt someone gently stroke my hand. It was so unexpected. But I wasn't scared. I actually felt comforted. Later that same night, I had an experience I still can't explain. I floated out of my body, rising to the ceiling, and looked down on myself. I saw my body in bed. Next to me stood a glowing figure, not sharply defined, but radiating warmth. It spoke to me, told me not to be sad. I swear it was my mom. Even now, I get chills every time I tell this story. Grief does strange things to people, but I like to believe sometimes those we lose find a way to say goodbye. One of my sisters lived about 30 minutes away. She was asleep the morning our mom passed. She later told us she dreamed of our mom. That night, saw her clear as day, saying goodbye. Moments later, she woke up. That's when she got the call. Another sister came home a few days later and smelled perfume, our mom's perfume, throughout her house. No one else had been there. The scent vanished as quickly as it came. Even my brother-in-law, a complete skeptic about anything paranormal, had something happen. He and my sister went to clean out Mom's things. Her bedroom had been locked. When they opened the door, a burst of wind blew out like a wave, yet all the windows inside were shut. He had no words. He was just freaked out. I had just turned 22 that year. I was working in a remote countryside village up in the northeast. My real birthday celebration had to wait until I got home the next week. So that night I decided to have a drink or two at the local pub, just me and a co-worker. Around 9:30, he called it a night and headed to the B&B. I stayed behind, told him I'd have one more and join him later. The pub was nearly empty, just me, the bartender, and a few old farmers sitting quietly in the back. I was halfway through my drink when I felt an icy gust across the back of my neck. I turned, thought maybe the door was left open, but it was shut. When I turned back, I jumped. Someone was suddenly sitting next to me. No sound, no creaking chair. And believe me, this place was old. Everything creaked. The stranger looked directly at me. His face was pale, expression unreadable. He looked anywhere from 25 to 40, hard to say. His hair was white blonde. His clothes were strange, black with streaks of red and yellow, like velvet stitched together with old cloth. But his eyes, his irises were huge, nearly pitch black. He smiled and said, "Hello, my name. Do you wish you were celebrating?" I never told him my name, never said it was my birthday. Still, I tried to keep things civil and chatted a bit. I remember him saying his name was Maphonis, weird accent. He told me he fixes people. I asked if he was a doctor. He laughed. Doctors wish they had my talent. At this point, I was seriously uncomfortable. He claimed he'd lived in the village all his life, though his accent told a different story. I asked if he knew anyone else in the pub. He said, "Oh no, but I know them from here and there, around and around." He smiled again. That's when I noticed his teeth, thick, square, not just the front, all of them, flat-tipped, even the canines. I finished my drink and stood up. Told him I was heading out. That's when he grabbed my arm, tight. His hand was cold and his nails yellowed, rough, like someone with bad psoriasis. His grip must have been stronger than it felt at the time because I had 5 bruises the next day, clear finger marks. He stared at me, blank expression. Then he said, "Stay away from co-worker's name on the road." And let go. I bolted out of that place, never saw him again. A few days later, I was ready to head home, but my car had broken down, and I needed one more night in that village to get it fixed. My co-worker offered to drive me back. It was on his way to the city. I considered it, but something told me not to go, so I stayed, fixed the car, avoided the pub, finally made it home, celebrated my birthday with friends and family. All good, right? Then came the call. My co-worker, the one who offered me a ride, died in a car crash on the drive back. I still don't know what to make of it. I didn't know him well, but I think about it a lot. The logical part of me says it's all coincidence, but some nights it still makes me feel uneasy.